In the complex dance of international diplomacy, US President Donald Trump's peace strategy for Ukraine hinges on a delicate balance of pressure and concessions. By suspending military aid to Ukraine, Trump aims to push Kyiv into negotiations with Russia. Meanwhile, he uses a mix of incentives and pressures to encourage Putin to make concessions. However, if Putin rejects a ceasefire, Trump's strategy could face significant backlash, especially from Republicans pushing for sanctions on Moscow. Will Trump's gamble pay off, or will Putin's refusal derail the entire peace process? Welcome to In Depth. Recent negotiations regarding a ceasefire in Ukraine have seen varying degrees of agreement among key players. The Guardian stated that while Donald Trump supports a ceasefire, Kyiv teams has tentatively accepted the 30-day proposal after talks in Jeddah. However, Vladimir Putin's acceptance comes with significant nuances, indicating a lack of genuine commitment to peace. Trump's push for concessions from Putin remains unclear, with Russian leaders seemingly gaining the upper hand. Analysts suggest that Putin's diplomatic tactics aim to delay any meaningful agreement while maintaining a front of cooperation. The situation is complicated further by shifts in US diplomatic representation and the need for effective monitoring of any ceasefire, highlighting the complexities of achieving a sustainable peace in the region. A coalition of 26 Ukrainian allies met virtually on Saturday to maintain collective pressure on Russia regarding President Trump's ceasefire proposal. According to the New York Post, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer emphasized the coalition's commitment to protect Ukraine on the land, at sea and in sky once a deal is reached. The coalition plans to transition to an operational phase to secure Ukraine's future. While Trump expressed optimism about a potential end to the conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin outlined conditions for a ceasefire, including Ukraine dropping NATO ambitions, demands Kiev has rejected. As both sides intensified aerial assaults, Ukrainian President Zelensky urged for unconditional peace negotiations and stronger security guarantees from allies.
In the complex landscape of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, US President Donald Trump's peace strategy hangs precariously in the balance. Trump has been pushing for a ceasefire facilitated by Washington. His approach involves negotiate with Russia, delicate dance that requires concessions from both sides. However, the linchpin of this strategy, post-30-day ceasefire, faces a significant hurdle if Russian President Vladimir Putin refuses to accept it. The strategy has included temporarily halting military aid to Ukraine, a move that has sparked controversy and concern among European allies. However, President Putin set stringent conditions for any ceasefire, including Ukraine's abandonment of NATO aspirations. These demands are non-starters for Kyiv. If Putin were to reject the ceasefire proposal outright, Trump's strategy would face significant risks, as efforts to thaw relations with Moscow might be seen as ineffective. The US president has hinted at imposing new sanctions on Russia if it fails to engage in peace talks, a move that could escalate tensions further. The stakes are high, with Republicans urging Trump to take a tougher stance against Moscow if negotiations fail. This could lead to a rift in Trump's relations with Putin, undermining his efforts to reset US-Russia ties. The international community watches anxiously, aware that a failed ceasefire could prolong a conflict that deepened divisions between major world powers. Will Trump's gamble pay off, or will Putin's conditions prove too great to overcome? The answer remains uncertain, as it now hinges on Putin's willingness to compromise, a prospect that remains uncertain amidst the complex geopoliticals at play.
Trump's Ukraine peace strategy titters on the brink as Putin weighs a ceasefire, leaving the international community wondering if diplomacy will prevail or collapse under mounting pressure. For more analysis, we are joined by Paolo Mauri, a military and strategic expert from Rome, and we are also joined by Olga Krasniak, an international relations professor from Moscow. A very good morning and a warm welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you with us on the program. Mr. Mauri, a very good day.
Good morning.
So what are the main challenges facing Donald Trump in his efforts to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, actually, the main challenges is what Moscow is going to do right now. In my opinion, the diplomatic way is not going at all, because Putin already put some points to gain the kind of peace in Ukraine. Especially the point number 5, that Putin wants a veto action to stop countries from assaulting Ukraine in case it was at war again. To me, it appears that right now, because strategic target of Russia aren't already gained. Moscow wants the Ukraine totally demilitarized, and Moscow wants NATO to push back from Ukraine and to push back from Eastern Europe. That is something that, in my opinion, Washington simply would not accept. I guess that right now we will face a diplomatic stalemate, and this stalemate, it will help Russia to regain forces, to regain the strategic action in Ukraine, and to regain a momentum in Ukraine. Right now, we are already facing it, since Ukrainian forces are retreating from Kursk. So I guess that the real point is what gonna Washington do right now, because it's very hard to find a deal with Russia.
Okay, Ms. Krasniak, how might the imposition of new sanctions on Moscow impact Trump's goal of improving relations with Russia? Ms. Krasniak, Ms. Olga, how might the imposition of new sanctions on Moscow impact Trump's goal of improving relations with Russia? Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Paolo. Mr. Paolo, can Trump successfully convince Putin to agree to a ceasefire, given the skepticism among analysts about Putin's commitment to peace?
Well, that's the big question. I think that knowing how Trump is dealing with this kind of features, he will raise up the tension to try to gaining some kind of effort with Putin. So maybe it will show more commitment to Ukraine in this further weeks that we're gonna have in this period, to try to set back the Putin intention to continue this war and to gain all his strategic targets. But it's not a gambling. Russian are not gambling right now. Russian wants to have all their strategic targets. Russian are pushing to gain, for example, abandon U.S. intermediate range missile deployments in Europe, or again a NATO military exercise in all the eastern European countries at the border of Russia. All things that I think that Washington would not accept. Maybe Putin is pointing at hundreds to gain 50, as we say in Italy, but I think that for Trump, it would be hard to reach an agreement for a ceasefire.
So, sir, you read at this point that, and your narrative is that Donald Trump, the situation or on the grounds what is taking place now is that it is not easy like he used to think, or or negotiations are getting more complicated, or at this point the international community should intervene to solve this problem, because I think it's escalating and it's leveling, and I think it's getting out of Trump's hands on the ground. What do you read, sir?
Well, first of all, what kind of international community? The United Nations. Putin already said that.
The United Kingdom as well is.
Yeah, the United Kingdom is pushing to have some kind of boots on the ground, no, to stop this war. But I don't think that is going to be the real solution, because Putin already said that he doesn't want any Western countries to have military troops in Ukraine as an interposition force. So the only exit way it should be that United Nations will get a peacekeeping force without any European countries, without even the US. But it's not that the point. The point is that Putin said that there is some security points. For example, the international recognition of Russian Crimea and Donbass, so Lugansk and Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, as part of the Russian Federation. And this is going to be a victory for the Russia, but a lose for the international community, because it means that you can make war to have some territorial gaining. So it's not so easy. And let's remember that United Nations has a Security Council where there is Russia and China. So it's not that easy. And I think that it's like a catch-22 right now. And to me, the future is not so clear.
So you don't read a clear future. Sir, okay, what role do European allies play in supporting Ukraine during these negotiations? And how might their stance affect the outcome? And how might they react if excluded, sir? So the question here, if they are excluded, because we already discussed the role of the European allies, of course.
Yeah, sure. I noticed that the US policy is already detached from the allied one, the European allies one. European allies are pushing forward to have a strong reaction, a strong response to Putin aggression. Right now, Washington is more talkative about it. I think that it's a great strategy of Trump to detach Washington and the US about the European crisis, to concentrate in the Indo-Pacific. So, as I noticed, Trump didn't condemn this kind of pushing up the tension by the European allies. Actually, is pushing all the European countries in the NATO to push up the expenditure for defense from 2% of the GDP until 5%. So this is the strategy. He wants that we Europeans take charge of containing Russia. Clearly, he doesn't want a total confrontation, an escalation that could lead at a direct war. But it's about us right now. It's about our Europeans to try to support and to end this war in some way.
Okay, Mr. Maui, what are the chances of additional sanctions being imposed on Russia if it rejects the ceasefire, and how might this impact the global economy?
I don't think that further sanction will have some effect.
Sir, why don't you think that further sanctions won't have any impact?
For two reasons. The first one is that Russia is under the international sanctions until 2014, and he had the time to re-equilibrate its economy. The second thing is starting from 2022, Russia has a military economy. So until the war it will continue, the military economy will continue too. And building tanks, building fighters, building ammunitions, it brings some kind of stability in the Russian economy. Clearly, there are big problems because they are facing right now a big inflation. It's around 24 or 25%. But the more the war will go on, the more the Russian economy will be able to support these international sanctions. So more sanction, it wouldn't be effective.
Okay, how effective will cutting military aid be in pressuring Ukraine to negotiate with Russia?
On the contrary, this will be...
And sir, why is Ukraine treated as the weakest link here?
But clearly because Ukraine, without the Western support, it wouldn't be able to face and respond to the Russian aggression. But right now it's treated like the weak diplomatic ones because it's a strategy. It's a Trump strategy to try the Russia back to the table. This had a result because we know that Russia and the United States are restarting their diplomatic ties. But again, Russia won't accept it because Russia has its own targets.
Sir, all your narrative since we began the program is Russia wouldn't accept, Russia wouldn't accept, Russia wouldn't accept. And there are challenges, of course, facing Donald Trump because his ceasefire now is at risk. So it's getting complicated. I'll get back to this, sir, but after asking Miss Olga Krasniak, welcome to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. How might the imposition of new sanctions on Moscow impact Trump's goal of improving relations with Russia?
Well, we should understand that American policy, American foreign policy, is predetermined to its domestic policy, and everything what is happening on the domestic level in the United States, that would be the main issue which is projected to the foreign policy. So being said that, it means actually that America's position and Trump position, of course, even it shows some signs to enter this conflict, but also we should understand America's interest, it's not about to help Ukraine, but maybe just to take out of this burden, which is called Ukraine, because America has maybe different interests. So, and in this case, given American position, we understand that Russia's sovereignty, Russia's interest, Russian foreign policy goals, it is something what we do no matter of American position or European position. So in this case, well, it's a good sign that we have diplomatic negotiations with the United States, but at the same time, understand we do not depend on any decision coming from any other country.
Okay, Ms. Olga, what are the key concessions that Russia is demanding before engaging in peace talks, and how might these affect Ukraine and its European allies?
You know, I would not be using the word of concession because it means, or it would mean that Russia is somehow in a weaker position, but the truth is the opposite. If you look at
why do you see it as the opposite, Ms. Olga?
So we see in the battlefield, Russia's military forces they are advancing a lot, and America, so European and America help to Ukraine. It's under the big question right now. But even though it will be continued, we see still Ukraine is not in a position just to be resistant. Of course, not at all. But the second point is resistance of Russian economy. So Russia's military base, Russian resource base, and Russian people. It is something what should be taken into consideration. So that is why using the word of concession towards Russia, I wouldn't be so certain about this, because Russia in a position of power, definitely geopolitical power, and it is not something what Russia would need to find certain compromise, but definitely not to give up.
Okay, how the rejection of a ceasefire or of the ceasefire by Putin impact Trump's diplomatic efforts and relations between the United States and Russia?
Well, Putin did not say no about the ceasefire, but of course, certain conditions was explicitly noted, because considering our previous relations or previous Minsk agreements and the Istanbul agreements of 2022, so we see the Western countries they were not been consistent in their position. So and given this fact of maybe not being faithful, and I mean European countries and the United States. So Russia would not trust. So this is a time to regroup, maybe to rearm Ukrainian forces. So and it explains, but it actually at the same time. So there's a potential ceasefire would not address the main reasons why actually this conflict has been started. So now talking about ceasefire, it means almost nothing. It's just useless talks, because we need to see like the more substantial reasons of this conflict, and they're not still addressed.
Mr. Maui, did you listen to Mrs. Olga, and did you hear what she said?
Yeah.
What do you think, sir? What's your narrative on what she said?
But well, I think that she has some right, but right now we have to understand what is happening on the front line. Okay, Russians are gaining some territories in Kursk, but they are retreating in the Donbass. Ukrainian troops regain Taresk, and this is not just because the U.S. restarted to give their military support, because we know that in the 24 hours between the Jeddah summit and the acceptation of the American conditions, the United States supported back intelligence sharing and military ammunition sending. Okay, but the problem is that what we're gonna do now. My colleague said clearly that right now the U.S. want to set back European crisis to switch their forces, switch their strength in another theater. That theater is the Indo-Pacific. So again, about us, it's about European. We European must find some kind of agreement or some kind of solution to this crisis, and London and Paris are trying to push tension with Russia, because
Yes,
that's the point. We think that heightening tension is the right way to deal with Russia. It's not totally my opinion, but it could be an exit way.
Got you, Mr. Paulo. Ms. Olga, before we wrap up this episode, your narrative, or what do you think of what Mr. Paulo is saying now?
Well, I think European countries think about economy, the development of their economy, because definitely we see now it's in not a really good shape without Russian resources. A second, maybe
without Russian, I beg your pardon, without Russian what?
Without Russian resources, without Russian cheap gas. So we see German economy now just moved its industrial bases to the United States. In a long-term perspective, economic development of European countries doesn't show maybe some optimistic sign. And second reason, so European countries probably they should concern about the migration crisis. And in this case, looking at Russia as an enemy, maybe it's not really smart position.
Okay, thank you very much. And the question remains, will Donald Trump be able to end and reach a ceasefire between Ukraine and Putin. And of course, all we discussed in today's episode of In Depth. That was Paolo Maui, a military and strategic expert, and Olga Krasniak, an international relations professor. We thank you very much for your valuable and informative knowledge. Thank you very much for being with us in today's episode. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you very much for joining us, and stay tuned for more coming up on Qnews.